Morning, Eddie, and thank you so much for joining me today. So to kick things off, perhaps you could give us a bit of an intro about your background and what you do. Tell us who you are.
Sure. My name's Eddie Whittingham. So I had founded a cybersecurity business about 4 years ago now and sold that last year. And then since then I've set up GoFounder. So the idea behind GoFounder.com is just to give people the tools that I wished I'd had when I first started out, because I think there's so much, I want to say, bullshit out there about how to start a business. There's a lot of false stuff you see online about how easy it is or how quick it's going to be. So really just to try and give people the tools they need to get started without all that noise. So just an opportunity really for those that need it.
Yeah, and I think there's certainly a gap there for people. I know when we started the business and we were given sort of government-funded business startup advice, and it was certainly by somebody who's never run a business or didn't have, and just felt this isn't necessarily somebody who's been there, done it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, unfortunately. So when I started, I was very grateful for the opportunity, but I got onto an accelerator program run by one of the big banks. And on the whole, I got a lot from it. But the stuff I got from it was the community and being surrounded by people in a similar boat or people who are a bit further along the journey than me that I could learn from. But the bit that it didn't deliver that I thought it might do was like, what is cash flow? How do I do it? All those basic elements of building a business that you need, I kind of was left wanting for more with that. And I think that's kind of where a lot of my frustration started. So I think most business owners, me included, probably yourself, when you first start, you're like literally just Googling everything. And my theory was there's got to be a better way than that.
Yeah, I think what we found in running a business is when we started, we were just so excited about to be doing it. We got a client, we were doing work. We didn't think long term. We didn't think what's the future, what's the 5-year plan. We just thought what's on our plate this afternoon, what we do tomorrow, what's happening next week.
Yep.
Do you feel that businesses almost need a period of time to just play and find the feet before they're ready to engage with yourself?
In terms of sign up to GoFounder, not necessarily. So it's pitched at people who've maybe not even got an idea and want to get into starting a business. So it's pitched there. But then the long-term value is really going to be the sort of community and people wanting to help each other out. And, for example, one of the things I found really beneficial for my business was I joined a sort of monthly meeting with 6 other directors of their own businesses, completely different sectors, but we all go through the same challenges. So I'd go every month and go like, having a nightmare with this topic or that problem. And then they've probably been there and done it, so they could give some advice. And it was really, I found that really helpful. So trying to bring that just to be a bit more accessible.
Yeah.
But it's interesting what you say. I think when you first start out, I know I did, what I did by the end of it was completely different to what I started out doing.
Yeah.
And I did need that period of time to kind of, like you said, sort of have a play around, see what works, push a few doors, see which open, because I think if I'd have gone hell for leather on my original idea, I'd have never obviously sold the business. It'd have been something completely different. It might still have done okay, but you need sometimes that bit of time to play around and not be too rigid with it.
Yeah, it's almost a bit like learning to drive, isn't it? You can be given all the theory, but until you've gone out, made your own mistakes, you need to a certain extent, and then you're ready for the guidance to take you to the next level.
Yeah, experience is key, with people listening to podcasts, for example, people reading books. It's all well and good, but you have got to, at some point, take the jump and get on with it. It's a bit like, see a lot of businesses, and I was guilty of this at the start. I spent months, I think, before I started my business, planning a logo and a name and a website, and then that goes out the window as soon as you're trying to earn some money and trying to get some customers through the door. It's because I think we're naturally drawn to the sexy stuff, aren't we? Whereas reality is, you need to follow the money, particularly in those early stages.
So with GoFounder, is it just your business, just you're the sole business?
So good or bad, I'm not sure yet. Is that it's almost a bit of a hobby project for me, and I mean that in no disrespect to running it as a proper business. So obviously my financial position since selling the business has changed from what it used to be. So I'm not desperately clamoring after clients and things like that, like I perhaps once was. So the idea behind GoFounder is I can actually invest proper time, proper money into trying to make it as good as it can be for the community that I'm trying to build. So it's a weird one. It's not something that I'm expecting tens of thousands of people to sign up to. And that's probably largely for a few reasons, but one of them being the messaging around it is, you know, there's no point coming to what I'm building if you are looking for a quick success, because you ain't going to get it. You know, go and spend your money on these stupid online get rich quick stuff. But if you're, you know, someone who's serious about building a business, or if you've already got a business and you're serious about growing, then that's the type of people I'm trying to attract. And I think that's, truth be told, that's going to be one of the challenges of the new business, is because I think people are attracted to easy wins. So I'm going to have to work really hard to attract that right community, to build the community that, you know, I think will be valuable to people.
Yeah. And how many people do you support then? Do you have a limit to how many businesses or individuals you can support at any one time?
Well, we're pre-launch at the minute, so we're launching in July. So we've got a really strong, solid waiting list of people signed up, and I think I've probably been surprised at the range of where they're at in their journey. So originally, I've sort of been building the content to be aimed towards those who are just starting out, but actually, in truth, there's a lot more people who are established looking for help. So there's going to be a range of stuff in there. So there's going to be some online work to work through if you want to. At the minute, that's aimed at people just starting out, but then there's a real push on the community aspect. So can we set up that sort of accountability with one another? Can we work in groups to help push each other? Like I mentioned, that sort of the directorship meetings that I was having that I found really helpful. And there'll be loads of one-on-one stuff, Q&As. We'll do weekly webinars, get experts in to talk about the things that they're, you know, they obviously are an expert in and can give good guidance on. But truth be told, I'm trying to vet that out. I don't want that to, again, I arc back to the accelerator program I was on. They were getting people, experts in, and they were just trying to sell their shit to us.
Yeah.
And I think startup founders are in a uniquely vulnerable position where you've got to be so careful where you spend the money. So I don't know. We'll see how it works. Like I say, just because I've had a successful business doesn't mean this is going to be a success. But my goal with it is to try and make it something that is really useful for people. So if I get someone coming in and they're just trying to sell their wares and what they're delivering isn't valuable, then I failed at my job, because my job almost is a gatekeeper to make sure something is going to be useful for the community. So yeah, trying to apply that logic of, would that have benefited me when I started? Would that benefit the members now? And apply that logic rather than just letting any old dickhead come in and try and sell their stuff, basically.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference, isn't there, between somebody coming in and giving best practice and saying where you can take things on and how you can make it work for you, rather than people coming in and saying, this is our company and this is how much you should pay us and we're going to help you. So
exactly, yeah. So it's a good example of that is, we sat down a couple of weeks ago with an accountant. It's actually someone I went to school with, as a partner of an accountancy practice now. Funnily enough, I used to copy him at maths. So
you picked the right person to copy.
Yeah. So I trust him. And basically got him. He's sat down and kindly spent a whole day with us filming, and it's literally a walkthrough of what all the different taxes mean, what VAT means, when you should apply, what's the cash flow forecast, everything that you need to know, broken down into layman's terms. And that's the sort of value we're trying to bring.
Absolutely.
Because that's the stuff I still to this day really struggle with. So being able to actually go through that step by step, I think, is super valuable.
I think also, going back to when you start a business, you're looking at what's immediately ahead of you, and perhaps forecasting isn't something that comes naturally to you, and that's something that, with the help and guidance of a professional who can almost take that pressure off. Because like you said, when you are perhaps feeling more desperate for work, that's when you take on the work that's not necessarily right for you.
100%. Yeah, we've all been there, haven't we? The clients that you think it's a good deal at the time, but they're actually just costing money because you're wasting your time with them. Yeah, 100%.
And you get those warning signs, but you push it to the back of your mind because you're looking at the pound signs rather than the...
Yeah, and I think, you know, every entrepreneur or every business owner will go through that process. It's part of the organic growth. You know, take someone. I remember we took on a client. I think they were paying us $1,500 a year for our security awareness training. So it's online training, so software as a service. So generally speaking, you're not going to lose much money on those deals. But it just absolutely drained our time from a support perspective, and so it got to renewal, and we had to tell him to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
He didn't like, but it's tough.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to, is just as equally important, isn't it? Whether you've got that connection with somebody as to whether businesses are aligned. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I've noticed, because I obviously follow you on LinkedIn and I love the content that you post out there through GoFound, and it keeps me amused. I think it's always very funny. It's definitely stuff I can relate to. One of the things is winging it is okay. I know you talk about this a bit, and I think, again, we've all been there. But is that something you could expand on a little bit?
I think for me, we are all so worried about being this so-called expert in our field. And don't get me wrong, as some people very boringly pointed out on the post, well, you don't want a brain surgeon who's winging. No, correct, of course you don't. But when it comes to business, you are going to have to wing stuff. You know, you're not an accountant, or probably not going to be an accountant. You're not going to be a lawyer. You're not going to be all these things. You'll be good at a couple of things, but you're not going to be an expert in others. So you're going to have to wing some stuff. I know when I first started out, I'd gone from I was a lawyer. I went from being a lawyer on the Friday to starting my business on the Monday. I'd never run a business before. I'd never hired someone before. I'd never done my own account. So by virtue of that, you have to wing it. And that's why my sort of catchphrase is Google is your friend, because you've just got to learn. You've got to teach yourself. And I think for me personally, that's what separates people who are probably going to do all right versus those that don't. So those that don't generally will look for the shortcuts and try and sort of figure a way around a problem, whereas those that generally go on to do all right will at least teach themselves the basics. So they'll get on Google, they'll spend a day researching how to do it, learn how to do it, have an understanding of it, and then maybe make the decision, right, well, if this is taking me 10 hours to do and I can pay someone that'll take them 2, work out the cost benefit there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think winging it, it's inevitable. So
yeah,
get on with it. Don't be afraid of it. Ideally, don't wing your subject matter expert like some people do, probably myself included when I first started out, truth be told. But you can. So
and I mean, industries change so much, don't they? I mean, we're in digital marketing, and social media was, yes, it was a thing when we started the business 13 years ago, but so much has changed. So we've had to constantly change, constantly learn, constantly adapt. And at some point you do feel like I'm winging this here, but then you catch up, you're up to speed, and then you're ahead of the game. And I think so even in your own field, it's all about, which leads me on to confidence really. And I think that this is something that I feel that really as a startup or businesses at any level, if you've got confidence, people will absolutely buy into you. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would, even if it's fake confidence.
Yeah.
I definitely displayed. And to be honest, still do. Like, you'd be surprised how many people like approach me, because obviously I sold a business. They're like, oh, you must, almost like I know everything. It's like, I haven't got a clue either. Yes, I did that, but there's also quite a lot of luck involved in that. And that's the bit that people neglect to tell people. But I think, yeah, confidence goes a long way. And that ranges from getting that first client on board through to pitching, through to even hiring staff. You don't want to be a nervous wreck when you're hiring your first hire.
Yeah.
They've got to buy into the project and buy into the hopes and dreams that hopefully you're going to share together. So yeah, confidence is a big part of it. And I think there's a lot you can do for your own confidence. And for me particularly, I found a lot of confidence when I first started in that whole community aspect. So like I mentioned earlier, as much as there's areas I didn't enjoy of that accelerator program, the bit I really got a value from was being able to be around people at different stages of their journey. And that's where you learn, and you learn quickly, because you're getting little bits of nuggets of information from people who've been there and done it before you, and that helps build your confidence. So they'll I don't know, offer up, say, even little nuggets like, have you heard of canva.com, where you can do your own graphic designs really cheap and really well for free, and really quickly. And that helps just add a little bit of experience to you. And so the little nuggets of information from people who've been there and done it, I think is what helped build my confidence up. Although maybe, I don't know, do you need a level of confidence to give it a go in the first place? You must have a little bit of confidence.
True, you've got to have had that character to make the step, to go for it, to have that belief in yourself. Yeah.
And I think that's a good point. I think people who, if you're thinking about taking that step, or you have taken that step, the fact you're having those thoughts means you've probably got more confidence, or maybe bravery, or naivety, than you're giving yourself credit for. So kind of harness that a little bit is probably the thought on that.
I think one thing I would disagree with you on is saying that you were lucky though in your, just because I think everyone has opportunities to be lucky and everyone has opportunities to be unlucky. So it is down to your moves and how you played it. Yes, situations come up and you think that was quite lucky actually.
I know what you mean. I'm still going to stick to that one there on the basis that, so my theory with it is, I think you need to, particularly for a sale of business. So there's a lot of other, I guess, in inverted commas, success. It depends what people deem as success. I know a lot of people like to think as selling a business as kind of success, in inverted commas. But I think for a sale of a business, you have to have some talent, whether that's your own or it's people you've hired and you've therefore created something that's worth something. You do need that ability to work exceptionally hard. But then I look at, my dad worked in retail for 40 years and worked a damn sight harder than me. But obviously he didn't have a business to sell and never was an opportunity. But I still think you need a bit of luck. So when I say that, I think the talent and the hard work can get you in a position where you can benefit from that luck. Because everyone says, well, you work hard to make your own luck. Well, I think you work hard to put yourself in a position where you can benefit from that luck.
Yeah.
And then, you still need that door to be open. So for me, yes, we'd created a training platform that was really good and the content was really solid and we'd worked, I had worked exceptionally hard to get there. I'm not going to take that away from my achievement in that respect. But I still needed a company who was looking for that at that specific time in that marketplace. So those sort of market conditions were out of my control, and that's where I account the luck to. But yeah, I get the sentiment that you make your own luck in terms of you have to at least work hard in the first place, and that's a given.
And I think it can be a bit of a deluded almost thought of a lot of business owners that I'm going to sell this business, what's your 10-year plan? Well, I'm going to sell the business. But actually, I was listening to another podcast, which was more based in our industry. So in digital marketing agencies. And actually, in reality, there's only about 1 in 400 businesses that ever complete a sale. So I think it's a bit deluded to think that that's just going to come along, going to happen. So I think working on your exit, which you don't want to think about when you're starting a business, but at some point you do need to think, how am I getting out of this business? Because you either sell it like you did externally, or look at a management buy-in or buy-out, or you wind your business down. That's the reality.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think sometimes people get overly focused on the end goal. I think it's important to have obviously goals in place and things like that. I think from my own experience, what was interesting for me is mine came out of the blue. So we hadn't pitched ourselves for a buyout yet. If anything, we were very, very early. So, for anyone listening to this, the time period that I experienced was exceptionally quick. So I don't think that's the norm.
Yeah. How long was it then? How long had you had your business when you sold?
When I first started, I was doing something else. So from actual inception of the idea that then sold, it was 3 years or 3.5 years.
Yeah.
But I think what was interesting for me was, I think I had been building to try and sell it, but not at the stage we were at yet. It was a long-term aspiration, 5 to 10 year plan, more realistically, but with a completely comfortable mindset that actually it's probably going to be a really nice lifestyle if nothing else. So I took the decision at the time with my wife that we'd reinvest. So, not taking money out of the business. At that point, we were sort of footloose and fancy free. We had a mortgage, but we had no kids. And at the time, it was kind of like, let's double down until we almost can't afford not to. So I guess in the back of our mind, it's like when a child arrives, if a child arrives, then we probably need to take stock, and we can't then abstract the money. Sorry, we need to start abstracting the money at that point.
Yeah.
Rather than reinvesting. So it's certainly a decision to have in mind. But like you say, you can't. There's no guaranteed success of sale. I know plenty of people who've reassured me they're going to sell for X million pounds, X years, and guess what? It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, interesting. I noticed you mentioned you brought your dad up then, and I've seen you talking about your dad as well in some of your posts. Has he been quite an influential figure to you?
I'm careful what I say here in case he listens. Not that he knows what a podcast is. You know what? Yes, I think so, because I'm from a very normal background. I'm from Scunthorpe, lived in a 3-bed semi, shared a bedroom with my brother, which obviously we hated and we fought all the time. Mum was
Taught you negotiation.
yeah, exactly. Of how to not get a hiding off my older brother. And then mum was a housewife, dad worked in retail, in sales. So, you know, not a particularly high income family. Sort of me and my siblings were the first generation to go to university from our family, that sort of thing. But what I did see all the way through my growing up was my dad and how hard he worked. So while he didn't make a lot of money, you know, he was out the door at 7, he was back in the door at 7, and he was grafting. And I think realistically that has rubbed off on me a lot. So he comes up with his tidbits of advice, which you know, he's never built an online business, so there's some bits that I can take with you know, a pinch of salt, and some bits which are useful. But ultimately, you know, he was a very good salesman. So I think the little bits and nuggets that he has given me. But I think for me, seeing his work ethic over the years is what rubbed off on me, and probably on the contrary, seeing how hard he worked and not maybe getting enough of what he deserved as well. Probably as well.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I'm the first to say, like, there's no way I've worked as hard as my dad in any shape or form.
Yeah.
So that can be a driver for you as well, I think.
Yeah. And there's probably people watching or listening to this that I think being inspired, thinking, do you know what? It's an idea I've had for a while. I really need to go for it. When would you say is the right time to start a business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There isn't a right time. There are definitely wrong times. Yeah. So again, it very much will depend on people's personal circumstances. So when I started, I can't remember if my wife and I had just got married or we were getting married, but we didn't have any kids. So that's a great time to start, because really your sort of pressures are quite greatly reduced. So we'd had a complete shoestring budget wedding. We'd got a house that needed loads doing on it. But you know what? We parked that and we said, let's just live extremely frugally for as long as we can, I guess, sort of mentally take, and give it a go. So we cut our expenses right down. We had it was a 20-year-old Vauxhall Corsa that was breaking down all the time, but just kind of doing enough. We stopped going out. We stopped going for meals. So like, that's what we were prepared to do. I'm not saying that everyone should, because equally, you know, unless you're in a solid relationship and you know, perhaps mentally very strong, that's going to take its toll as well. But there are wrong times to do it as well, I think. So, you know, I see people, oh, I fancy starting a business. Well, you're mortgaged up to your ears. You've got 2 cars on tick. You've just got 2 kids. Like maybe that isn't the right time. Potentially, you're going to have to adjust your lifestyle to account for that. So when should someone start it? I think I would always encourage them to try and test their idea while they've got the comfort of an income, and or try and get a job in a startup or a small company, because I think the exposure you can get there and what you can learn is,
I agree,
amazing. Like I honestly don't know where I'd be now if I'd have got a job at 21 in a startup.
Yeah,
that's kind of my mentality with it. I think the amount of opportunity you get in a startup, you might even stay in the startup and become a senior person, so that's amazing. But it's just being exposed to the decision-making process, the thought process, the pressures, the wins, you can learn so much. I wish in hindsight, that's probably what I do and I don't. Obviously, I'm grateful for the way I've come to where I am today, but I think if I were to do it again, I'd love to have joined a startup, you know, 2nd, 3rd, 4th person through the door, and been part of something. I think that would be my choice.
Because you see all aspects of the business in operation at that point, don't you? But I equally think I mean, I'm probably speaking from our industry, but I think it's great for people to be in some of the bigger organisations as well. So you get to really see the confidence, and when you're part of a team that's working on big clients, how they approach pitches, how they're operating all. But equally, I think the small business side, if you're looking to run a business, is just as important.
Well, I think it's interesting you mentioned that. So my original background, I joined the police at 18, was in the police just shy of 10 years, then joined one of the big law firms, so clients like Rolls-Royce and Sainsbury's. And I'll be honest, as a daft lad from Scunthorpe, I was shitting myself thinking, God, I'm going to look a right tit in front of Rolls-Royce and Sainsbury's and all that. But actually, what the benefit of working in a big organization had for me was I realized from a confidence perspective, actually, like, these people working here, I'd been to Leeds Met, for example, and my colleagues at Oxford and Cambridge educated. Well, they're no better at the job than me, or
Yeah.
the clients are not as scary as you think they are.
Yeah.
And also, these huge organizations move exceptionally slowly.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're then a startup, you've just got to move a bit quicker than them and offer a better service, which you will because you're a startup. So I think there's definitely, you learn a lot no matter where you sort of end up. But I think if you could join a fast-paced startup, you'd learn loads.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned as well about trying to trial it while you've still got some income coming in from somewhere else. So when Libby and I started our business, we just did what you did, made sure that financially wise, we presumed we weren't going to take any money at all for the foreseeable, made sure that we were okay with that, takes the pressure right off. Anything that you do bring in is a bonus. For me, it wouldn't have suited to have a day job at the same time, because I felt like I need to be there 100%. Do you sometimes see where people are held back a bit because they're trying to do it all, and actually a business does require, as you said, a lot of time?
Yeah, I was guilty of that. So the day I started, like I mentioned, so I'd started the business, but as a sort of comfort blanket, I'd got a part-time lecturing gig. So don't ask me how I blagged that one, but it's just someone I knew worked at one of the universities. And I managed to get, I think it was 2 days a week. And then sometimes it was the weekend as well, because it's a law school, which isn't on the sort of traditional universities. And the money was good. So it made sense in my mind at that time to do that. And it did, because it got me from, going from a decent-ish wage to zero, and helped me kind of live a little bit in terms of paying my way in the house, really, more than anything. But it got to a point where then it was detrimental, because I was relying on it, and it was a crutch, and it was holding back the business.
Yeah.
It probably took me 3 months too long to realize that. Not that it had a massive ramification in the end. It didn't, but it definitely slowed it down. And if I look back, that was a mistake on my part, because I was too reliant upon it. Whereas actually, had I ripped that band-aid off, it'd probably give me a bit more of a rocket up my ass to get on with things. So there's swings and roundabouts. I think if you can find a way to earn some money, particularly when you first got that idea, where you're testing it out, whether it's to try and get your first client, or it's even creating your website and those things, then that's sensible. But there comes a point you are going to have to just go into it, really. I've got a friend at the minute who's trying to start something whilst they've got a lot of plates spinning, and the reality is they're not gonna make that movement they need to make and get that momentum they need until they do something. So they're kind of taking a step back at the minute and looking in their life, where can they maybe get that extra bit of comfort from financially, whether it's can they take out a little bit of debt, or can they borrow some from somewhere to give them a bit of a runway to go at it. And unfortunately, I think people, while I don't like people getting into debt to give things a go, at some point you're going to have to take a risk. So it's there's no reward without the risk, unfortunately. So you've got to make a decision at some point.
Yeah, I think you would probably also, something that you see as well is business owners who have got a skill, and that's how they got into business. And it equally is having another job. It's making sure that at some point you work on the business rather than in the business as well. And as you start to grow a team, it's so tempting to think, I can do that, and actually I can keep doing that. That avoids me bringing in a salary. So it's the same kind of thing, really, isn't it? As well, you've got to look at where are we trying to get this business, and actually you're holding it back by being a doer rather than a.
Massively, I think that's got to be right up there with classic mistakes I think people make, and I have 100% been guilty of that, where you think it makes more sense for you to be doing it because you've got a particular either skill level or attention to detail, or you're a perfectionist, which is a super dangerous place to be. But sometimes it's recognizing that, if you want to grow the business, you're going to have to hire someone at X, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And sometimes they might not even do the job as well as you sometimes, but maybe that's good enough. More often than not, you're surprised, and people are 10 times better at something than you are. So
Or sometimes you're preempting what the customer or client's going to think about something that you're presenting, whereas actually it's spot on.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can be too close to it yourself, and that's where you let the team do it, and you focus on managing that team, growing the business.
And that's a delicate part of the journey, isn't it? When you start out, you have to do everything. Like, let's not disguise that. You have to do everything.
Totally.
You should, shouldn't you, as well? I think you learn so much by doing that. But there's that weird little transition bit where you're maybe not quite busy enough to take someone on and you're doing a lot of it yourself. But in 2 or 3 months or 6 months, you're going to be overrun. And that's the time to hire someone, because you'll have time to at least train them up in the ways you want them to work. Whereas if you wait 2 or 3 months or 6 months, you're going to be knackered, because then you're going to throw them in the deep end without enough time to learn. So it's tough. It's a balance, and obviously that brings a whole world of other hurt in there, because as soon as you hire someone, you're responsible for their mortgage and their future and their plans. So it's not a decision to take lightly, but you need to act swiftly with that and not dilly-dally on it.
I think it's having that discipline with yourself really as well, because I think sometimes if something's brought to you and, there are certain decisions that as a company owner you should be reviewing, not everything, but some of them. And when you look at something and you've got the skill set to make changes or get involved, it's having that discipline to go back to the team member with the feedback and say, this is where I'd look to, rather than just taking it on yourself and doing it, because it's not good for them, not good for you. And I think that's where it's really difficult. And I know for me personally, my background's a designer, so I know that when I see things and I've got the skill set to dip in and change, so what's helped us is really having a mentor to tell us, you need to be doing this.
Yeah, well, it's that classic thing, isn't it? It might only take you 5 minutes to fix it, whereas it'll take you 15 minutes to teach it. So right then, it's much quicker just to get it done.
Yes.
But long term, obviously, it's a much better investment to take the time. It's just when you're absolutely rammed busy, your logic kind of gets a little bit
just do it.
Exactly.
But I think also it's going to knock that person's confidence, thinking, well, I haven't done that to the standard, somebody's had to take it and change that. Whereas actually sometimes when you're in that position, you think, do you know what, they're going to think, why can't they just do it? They've got the skill set to do it. So it is being quite disciplined. And
it's having that long-term goal, isn't it? The holy grail is having a team where, with respect, they don't need you, isn't it? You just should be there to sign things off and look over the process. So by investing that probably a little bit longer time now will benefit you in a year's time. I always think, when you hire a first new member of staff, or any member of staff, probably don't get any value from them. Real value, I mean, in terms of if I'm talking about business perspective, a business decision, you probably don't get enough value from them for at least 6 to 9 months. So it can take a while to get up and running, and that's not devaluing new employees. It's just from a business perspective, the time and money that's invested in that, including the hiring process, it's lengthy and it's costly. So you've got to play the long game with it.
Yeah. How important do you think it is for people to choose clients wisely, and not just take every inquiry that comes their way?
Yeah, we touched upon that earlier. I think you've got to find clients that fit. It does depend what you're selling, obviously. So if you're a service-based business and you get a client who's not on board with the values, or they've got their own way of doing things, but they just hire you for the sake of it for whatever reason, you're going to be knackered, because you're going to spend that much time dealing with, almost fighting them. If you're a product or a sort of like maybe software based, it's probably less important, but not exclusively. So again, if I look at GoFounder, if GoFounder gets inundated with business coaches, mindset coaches, people who are not trying as hard as they could to start a business, or people who've got, people who are looking for a get rich quick thing, or if it gets filled with any even industry, so if it gets filled with marketers or salespeople, whatever it is, it'll lose its value. The value is in that real broad mix of people at different stages of the thingy. So even that's probably my biggest challenge with GoFounder coming up, is how do I make sure it's not seen as something that people can delve into to try and sell their shit to. It needs to be a real community process. And what's the barrier to entry there? Should it be a low membership fee? Should it be a high membership fee? I want it to be accessible to everyone, but if it's super, super low, we
Yes.
get filled with people who think this is going to be the ticket to success when it's not, because the hard work is. So yeah, it is, client fit is hugely important.
It's interesting how you talk about how you price things there as well, because I do think sometimes when you're starting up, you want to go in, you want to maybe undercut, you want to show that well, I don't want to rock the boat because this would be massive for us. I'd really like to get this. Whereas actually, that price that you've potentially gone in with, where you're perhaps making a tiny bit of money, or maybe only breaking even, or maybe even going in at a loss, you've just totally undervalued and lost confidence in the person that you're selling to.
And it's so hard to claw back. I literally chopped my arms and legs off once for a decent, like a household name, which at the time I was buzzing, because I was like, brilliant, we can put this as a testimonial on the website. This is going to look amazing, blah, blah, blah. But the reality of it was, every renewal we were dirt cheap. So like
very difficult to go up.
Yeah, we couldn't really. We obviously, like, a little bit, but it wasn't ever enough to claw back the value of the deal. And by that point, it was sort of 2 years in, and the shine of that client on the website had gone, really, because we've got bigger ones. So then all of a sudden, we had this client with, say, 200 employees, who we should have probably been charging double, triple the amount we were charging. And yeah, it's just the way it goes, isn't it?
And it's almost tainted from the start, really, isn't it? Because you kind of think, oh, well, you've got a good deal there, and actually we're making more on this, and you think, well, they never asked you to do it at that price.
Exactly. And there's the counter argument to that as well. You got that exposure from that client, and so on and so on. So there is that to consider when you are making those decisions. But yeah, certainly don't undervalue yourself, because I think people do, and I did when I first started. My first sort of business idea that we were running, I was doing reports at like 180 quid plus VAT, and they were taking me, I don't know, probably 5 hours to do. Which, you're not going to build a scalable business doing that. So you've got to look at what it's going to be worth to you, and as daft as it sounds, which I think a lot of people don't do, is work out what that means per hour.
And if it's working for you, if it's right. I think also something that obviously it depends if you're selling a product. If you're selling a product, then there's kind of a RRP on that product. If it's service, it's not necessarily, it's a bit harder, because is it comparable? People sometimes look at the price and another price, but actually what they're proposing is completely different. But I think it's sometimes good to go in with options as well. So perhaps make them feel like there is a decision-making process there already. So, well, okay, if you want lower end, we're here. This is kind of where we'd recommend you be. But if you really want things to go a bit quicker, this is the top end. And in some respects, that, in my opinion, can take out a bit of the negotiation, because they feel like they've got options.
I think that's really important. Yeah, really big fan of that. And the other thing to add on that actually is, people, don't always be impressed by the most expensive. So I know someone who's had investment, and they ended up going with a marketing company to manage their online adverts, and they were spending an astronomical amount of money with them. And I think if he's honest, he'll probably look at that and think he went with them because he wanted the best in class, and he presumed that the most expensive were the best in class, and that's not always the case. So even as a startup, when you're buying, you've got to make sure you don't fall victim of that same thing that you're even struggling with internally.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. And I think there's still, it's probably been broken down. Everyone's working remotely, but there's definitely still a tendency in our industry to think, I've got to go to London because it's going to be the top agencies, we're going to get the best results. And especially as a startup, going to a London agency, I think you're such a small...
Bonkers, yeah. You're absolutely off your head if you're doing that.
Yeah.
But there's so many places you can actually save money if you think about it. So, like, if I go to a top-rated accountancy practice as my example being from Scunthorpe, if I went to a top-rated accountancy practice in Scunthorpe, they'll probably be the same price as a mid to low agency accountancy practice in Manchester, for example.
Yes.
But the field's not different. They can still get the same results. So, we're in an age as well, aren't we, where location's not wildly important. So just because they're in London, well, so what?
Yeah.
I can have a registered office in London for $5.99 a month.
Yes. Yeah, talking about remote, and obviously things have changed now, opened up. I think people aren't as restricted with their own recruitment employment because they have tried the whole working remotely. How do you worry about businesses that are just growing, that are starting, that are taking on juniors with working remotely?
It's definitely a challenge, I think, because I think whenever I've hired, I think the thing that I found really valuable is having that one-on-one time with them to get them to buy into the business. So it's finding different ways of doing that. I guess the counter to that is there's a bigger job pool for you there now, in terms of if you're not married to having them in the office, think how many more candidates that are open to you, not even in this country. So there's pluses and minuses to it, but I definitely think it's a challenge. I don't think it should put people off hiring. I think it's still if you need to grow, there's only one way to grow typically, and that is sort of increasing the size of the talent that you've got in the workforce. So yeah, it's probably going to get better. So I don't think if you're hiring now, you're looking ahead and thinking, actually, at least we can get back in the office soon, or whatever it might be. But I do think the thing that has changed dramatically in the last year is expectations. So I think employees, the sort of power's a little bit more with them at the moment. So I think they will expect to have more flexibility. So it might be working in 3 days in the office, 2 at home, or whatever. And I think most employees are going to have to do that. And I think they should want to as well, because I know personally that I prefer that. So why wouldn't my employees?
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And I think it gives that just that break in the week as well. And if they're completing the work, if they're delivering on what you need them to do, then why not accommodate that a little bit?
Exactly. We've all been in jobs with Sunday night dread, haven't we?
Yeah.
Whereas I think if I was in my old job now, which I did hate as a lawyer, but if I was still in that now, and it was Monday, Tuesday in the office and Wednesday at home, would I hate it as much?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, do you know what? Wednesday, at least I can go work in the garden for an hour, or I can have my lunch at home and just chill and put the football on, or whatever it might be. So I think there's a lot of benefits from an employer perspective if we are a bit more open with it.
And it does seem crazy now, because I mean, I live in Chester, and my first job was over in Manchester, which doesn't sound too far, but it was quite often a 2-hour commute each way.
Yeah.
So that's 4 hours straight away out of your day that I would have rather have been working than driving or sat on a train. And but I loved being in the office. I loved being around people, but perhaps not every day of the week.
Oh, well, yeah, and you'd have loved it, wouldn't you, if you were there 2 or 3 days? You'd have still got much out of it, but you'd have saved yourself 8 hours, 100 quid a month. Well,
and you've not got that stress driving home thinking, I used to think, I just need to go and sleep on a sofa somewhere in the office, because I'm going to be repeating this in like what felt like 5 hours time.
I miss the commute a little bit at the minute. Like, it's only normally half an hour because the traffic's bad or whatever, but I quite miss that, because for me, I like that disconnect between the office and work. I put a podcast on, for example, and I found that like quite therapeutic in a weird way. Having said that, I like working at home so much, as much I do that I'll not go back full time. I used to be, even as my own business owner, I want one of them in the coffee shops. As much as I was jealous of people who could do that. I needed like 3 screens, all my paper everywhere.
Yeah.
I'd be in the office at 7:30 and I'd leave at 6:30. And I look back now and think, well, yeah, a couple of days at home would be delightful.
Yeah, but it's acceptable now. So
that's
exactly. One positive.
True.
I think another thing at the moment is that you see so much on social media rammed down everyone's throat. Is so many people talking about the quick success, or perhaps it's not being quick, but you do only tend to see people sharing the good bits of business, which is natural, because people don't want to show cracks or weaknesses, because they're maintaining their impression, their brand. But I think that's really tough, and I do think that's where you can struggle, and you almost get without. Nobody wants to compare themselves, but sometimes it's hard not to.
Well, I think I think that you've touched upon something that's a large driver for a lot of the content I try and put out. Because I think it's part of that wider problem of social media, which is causing so much mental health problems for people. And it's that constant comparison. It's not just, you think about the kids these days, it's not just in the playground and then they go home and turn off like I used to. It's constant, it's in your face all the time. And it annoys me, it saddens me, it frustrates me, it angers me that we see it at a professional level, like dickheads just pretending they're successful, or only highlighting the really fancy bits. So then naturally when you are building, you are comparing yourself. Funnily enough, I had a competitor in Manchester who sat at the same time as me, who decided to troll me effectively. So we were still under our old branding at the time. It was a week before we were due our rebrand, so we rebranded from a very corporate look and feel to a really out there, kind of brightly coloured, sort of, you know, really fun tone of voice, outspoken,
more friendly, approachable.
Yeah, and a bit more in line, kind of with, I guess, myself. So I thought it needed to be corporate, and then over time I realised actually no, there's a big market here for just being really personable. So anyway, a week before we were due to rebrand, this competitor decided to just message me on LinkedIn. Bear in mind, don't know him from Adam, and start something along the lines of like taking the mick out of how small the clients were on our testimonials. And obviously it was a week before we were due to go rebrand, and we had like Taylor Wimpey, Gusto, Fulham Football Club, so some big names there. And I just sort of said, like, you know, if you'd like to talk about it face to face, let me know. But then a week later, a couple of days later, he sent me another message, like trying to take the piss out of stuff on the website. And I just thought, like, what a sad life to be in. But that's probably because he was
quite jealous.
Projecting his own insecurities, and probably a victim of social media himself, in fairness, where he felt like he had to improve his own esteem by pulling others down. And I don't know if he would have been sharing some of all the positive stuff that he was experiencing, but the truth is, as business owners, we should embrace some of that negative stuff as well, because it's not an easy journey, but you're not the only one going through it. That's, you know, every business owner goes through the same journey, don't they? Whether, no matter what sector you're in, the problems you'll have are the same. Your first hire, your first customer, how to grow, how to get your fifth hire. You know, we all go through that same thing. So I think it's about helping each other and trying to build a community that we can all support each other, because it's such a unique journey to go on. It's such a scary journey to go on. You need to not fall into the trap of believing all this quick overnight success. And I think there's two parts of it. There's the overnight success we're seeing that, you know, I think the young'uns are buying into, which is the dickheads in the Lamborghinis, and you know, they're carrying around stacks of cash and stuff, which is just complete, you know, rubbish. It's absolute bullshit. We all know it is. But when you're young, you're naive, and you might fall into that, and you think buying a £2,000, £3,000 course might get you to that level that they're at, even though they've rented the apartment, they've rented the Lamborghini, whatever it might be. So that's one side of the coin, and the other is this drive of positivity where it's unrealistic. And LinkedIn's a breeding ground for that, unfortunately, where it's people only sharing the successes and the wins, which makes normal business owners think they're doing a bad job. But the reality is, you know, they've got an award. Well, they've probably paid for the award. Truth be told, or they're hiring their 8th person that week. Well, yeah, but you haven't seen the 8 that have just walked out because it's a terrible. So
absolutely.
Just got to take what you see with a pinch of salt, haven't you?
And I also think it is relatively the beginning. You can grow quite rapidly, and I think, you know, not by any means trying to sound cocky, but I think growing a business is the easy bit. Where it's difficult is then sustaining that and taking your hits and bouncing back from it. And I think that's why you don't see people talking about.
I massively agree, because you get to a point, I think personally, 3-5 years in, where you might feel like your branding's going stale, or you're no longer the new kid on the block. Maybe we're now just a mid-sized company, so we're not really a cool startup anymore. We're not this massive conglomerate. We're kind of like fighting, and we don't know what. So you have like a bit of an identity crisis. But as you say, you know, getting from 0 to 100,000 is the easy bit in a way.
It is. You've got absolutely
exactly. So you're either going to get there or you're not. So going from 100 to 500 and 500 to 1 million, now we're in a different ballpark. And so there's, again, different challenges. but I don't. It comes back to that thing of, does it get easier? Don't know. Not easy, just different challenges, I think.
Yeah. I think you learn to take things less personally, I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think sometimes you don't win everything. And I think, you know, sometimes you think, because when you do start a business, you might be winning absolutely everything. You're on a high. If you don't win, you probably don't analyze it as much because you weren't expecting to anyway. So I think sometimes it's just about knowing what are you looking for from your next move, and sometimes the things that don't come off are right for you as well. And I think you get that confidence and think it doesn't matter with what you've built up, you've already got that kind of backbone of your business there.
Well, and I think that goes to that point of what you see on social media. So the business gurus would have you believe that if you're not doubling your turnover year on year, you're going wrong. Well, no, bollocks. As long as you're going in the right direction, you're going in the right direction. Yes, we'd all like to grow faster, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, these stories of exponential growth are rare. You know, you're not going to be the next unicorn. You're probably not going to double year on year because business isn't that simple, unfortunately. You're going to hit bumps along the way. Coronavirus, I'm sure, will have knocked a lot of businesses to have a harder year than they had hoped. But it doesn't mean it's over. Just because you don't grow for a year, it doesn't mean it's over. It just means you've got to re-look at where you're at and where you want to get to, and figure out a slightly different path there. Because maybe what was working isn't working, and that comes back to what we said earlier, where you've got to kind of change with the times as well, haven't you?
And I think it's getting the balance with your impression as well, because I know when we partner with other companies or when we bring on clients, they want to know that you're successful. They want to know that you've proven it, you're going to do a good job, you can showcase perhaps something similar that you've done. But equally, if we did turn up in a Lamborghini, they might think, hang on a minute, there's something not quite right here.
There's such a balance, because I used to rock up in my old Corsa and I had to park it around the corner. There was one time.
Yeah, there is a balance, isn't there?
There was one time I went to see an insurance broker about this potentially pretty lucrative opportunity where we'd package our training with their insurance. And I rocked up, parked my Corsa in the very far corner of the car park where no one could see it. And then apparently I had to park in one of the yellow visitor bays at the front. So I parked my car, went inside, got the pass for the car, took it out, put it in, went and had the meeting. Anyway, when I came back, the receptionist was on a lunch. And so he was like, oh, I need to get a pass for the car. And I was like, oh, I'll just go get it. Don't worry. He's like, no, I'll come out with you. As I went to my 20-year-old clapped out Corsa and got the pass out, I was like, see you later. And then, that
can impact your confidence though, can't it?
It did at the time. As that as it sounds, it did, because I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, he must think I'm an absolute weapon driving that. You know, like clearly camped in my arm. That's what I felt like. And I wasn't. It was still a very...
There's reason behind it, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a decent proposition I was putting in front of him. The car was immaterial, but he will have looked at that and gone, this dickhead is lying at his ass because he's driving that shit.
Yeah, but then you can get the flip side, can't you? Where you think, a minute, I'm paying an absolute fortune here if they can afford all this. So getting the balance. Yeah. Oh, well, it's been absolutely brilliant. I've really, really enjoyed this morning speaking to you. Thanks so much, Eddie.
Likewise. Really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been great fun. So so just let us know what's your domain if people want to check you out, if you want to have a look at GoFounder.
So it's gofounder.com, or you're more than welcome to reach out, connect on LinkedIn, and if I can help, I'll be happy to.
Perfect. Absolute pleasure. It's been great fun. Thank you so much.